my whatever the bit of knowledge that I have in this particular field. So what I'm going to do in the next 90 minutes is, Dr. Harish has told me that the main audience are from the teachers from engineering as well as medical faculty. So what I will be doing in next 90 minutes is I'm going to tell you what are the resources available for bioinformatics research if you want to pursue on the internet. So that's what I have given the title, bioinformatics in cyberspace. So I hope I am audible to all. And I request all the participants to kindly ensure that you mute your audio, as well as while I am presenting, please don't try to push the presenting button in your Google Meet app if you are on a mobile, or if you are on a desktop, please don't try to push the button of present now. So that will, what happens is that will interfere my presentation. So with that brief background, let me start. If you are not hearing my voice, kindly put a message in your chat box so that I can understand. Or Harish sir can intimate me whether I am audible or not at any point of time. Harish sir, can you hear me? Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir. We are hearing you.
Okay, fine. So I hope all of you can see the presentation right now running.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. So the agenda here I'm talking about is, I'll give you.
Sundar sir, your voice is not audible.
Okay.
Hello.
Is it the same for everyone? Hello. Is it same for everyone?
No, sir. We are able to hear you.
Okay. So I am going to presentation mode right now. Can you, if you can hear me, you just ping me, right? Okay. So now in a presentation mode, can anybody hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the agenda that I am going to follow is, I'm going to give you a very brief introduction of bioinformatics, and I'll tell you why bioinformatics is needed, and I'm going to tell you how the data explosion has happened in a bioinformatics research space. Then what you can do with bioinformatics and where and all you can go for data shopping. And I'm going to explain a brief one case study if the time permits. So meanwhile, if you can have your any doubts, you can shoot your question then and there itself. You can interrupt me at any time and you can ask your question either in the chat box, or you can unmute your mic and video and ask me the question. Right. So starting with the definition of bioinformatics, so many people has given so many different types of what do you call the definition for bioinformatics. Some standard institutes like NCBI has given a very elaborated definition, and at the same time, the editorial in BITS journal will concise the above definition into a very shortest form of definition of 2 lines. Bioinformatics is a combination of computer science, information technology, and genetics to determine and analyze the genetic information. But I don't think neither of these two will do a justice for definition of bioinformatics, because the second definition will concentrate morely on genetics, but bioinformatics is nowadays, it has evolved so much that genetics is only a very small part of the bioinformatics research space. So what I can say is, according to me, bioinformatics can be divided into 3 words. One is BIOS, the other one is Informa, and TICS. So you know that biology is BIOS plus Logos, right? So Logos is to study, whereas bios is the living system. So in continuation, we can say in one single sentence, biology is the study of biological information. So similarly, TICS is nothing but the systematic study. So it is the systematic study of biological information with the help of information technology. That's what is Informa stands for. So that is the one which is that is where the amalgamation of biology as well as information technology that is going on. So for this thing, I should thank you engineers, especially. I have a very great respect for you engineers, especially in computer science as well as information science domain, because the information technology, as we know, it contains computer technology as well as communication technology. So computer technology is all about collecting the information, storing the information, manage, process, search, retrieve, and present the data for various users. So that is the aim of computer technology. And communication technology, when it comes to it, it is all about disseminating the information that you have. So it mainly aims at delivering, disseminating, exchanging, transmitting, and exchange of information in local, global, as well as regional context. So in both these domains, you engineers have contributed a lot, because I still remember when I bought my first computer, it was having 4 GB of hard drive, and that was costing somewhere around 80,000 rupees with a CRT color monitor. Since it is color monitor, it is 80,000 rupees, and we had made an insurance to that computer. Nowadays, that 4 GB hard disk is there in your pocket in the form of a pen drive. Even you have gone up to like 64 GB pen drive or something like that. So that is how the computer technology has evolved over a period of time. And you people have come up with a very great kind of computer which can harbor humongous amount of data in the form of, say, earlier we had only the magnetic tape kind of technology for storing, and later came the CD drive, compact disc, then DVD, then magnetic tapes, and then nowadays everything is on the cloud. So everything is in the flash technology, where within the very limited cross section you can store enormous amount of data. So that's what is the technology of all your flash drives. So and nowadays, recently I saw a report published by Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where they are using DNA for storing the information, where 1 nanogram of DNA was sufficient to store 1 terabyte of data. So if that is a DNA based kind of memory system comes, then your once again your pen drive may get obsolete, because 1 nanogram of DNA can be accommodated in a very small space. Even you can see Elon Musk has released one more video in Twitter, how he used a brain chip. So he had a chip implant in the pig brain, and whenever it used to sniff, it used to generate a signal. So that means to say the technology is going exponentially, it has been evolving. And ultimately it will help you to store more of the ultimate objective is to store different kind of data without compromising the space. So that is the computer technology. And when you generate different types of data, and you need software for processing of different types of data. So earlier, why this kind of evolution has taken place in both computer technology as well as communication technology is that we never stopped ourselves for one particular field in order to understand ourselves. So if you go back to the very old scientific literature, where in the second PUC we might have studied that the Aristotle was the father of biology, we say. Cornelius Linnaeus, we say, is the father of binomial nomenclature or something like. So whenever the earlier research was there, that is purely based upon anatomy. Anatomy is nothing but the study of morphological feature, what you appear outside. So for that, you need some earlier research was having some sketch kind of, image sketches or image data or something like a very small pencil-based sketches or something like. So you wanted to understand how an animal look like, how a plant look like. That's a very basic kind of understanding that people are trying to do. So, and then you thought that anatomy, understanding anatomy is not yeah, sufficient. So we and try to understand the physiology of an organism, because anatomy, like on the surface, we may look same, but underneath the body, we may behave differently. So that's why people try to understand the physiology. So when you go to the physiology from the external appearance, you went inside, one step inside the organism to the organ as well as tissue level in order to understand the physiology. But you are not enough, you are not satisfied with the whatever the data that is coming in the physiology. But when you go to the physiology, you need microscopes to observe the cells, you need different types of imaging solutions to observe how the cells are made up of, how the cells are interacting with each other. So you generated different kind of data. And when you saw that the physiology, you did not stop over there. You try to understand what is the chemical basis of the life. That is where the biochemistry comes in. Because ultimately, your body is nothing but the combination of protein, lipids, carbohydrates, as well as the other small molecules, small organic biomolecules. So if you can understand, being a biochemist, I say every organism is a meaningful, ordered arrangement of biomolecules. You're nothing but nothing else other than the biomolecule. So you try to understand what is the biochemical basis of life. So that's where you went for biochemistry. Now, when you try to understand the biochemistry, where you will be understanding the different kind of metabolism that is going on inside the cell, that time you were depending more on, say, a new kind of data like HPLC or peak data, spectroscopical data, or different types of data. Once again, you can see you started from the pencil sketches, you came for high resolution image data, you came for, now you are at the spectroscopical data. Then you understand that you try to understand why the biochemical reactions vary within the different tissues of the same individual. The biochemical process that goes in brain is different from biochemical process that is going on inside the heart is different. So altogether it is different. So what is the reason why the different cells do contain different types of biochemical reactions? So the answer is that all these biochemical reactions are subjected to something which is giving the stimulus to the cell. Every cell will metabolize or behave like what it is behaving in response to some stimulus. Now, what is the stimulus? Stimulus can be hormones, can be growth factors, can be any other stimulus like any other ligand which is going to bind to your receptor on the cell. So all these that is the study of endocrinology, where you were in need of understanding what kind of signaling mechanism are there which is present inside the cell which responds to the external stimulus. So that is the endocrinology. Now you are in a condition where you try to understand the proteins on a whole. So which are the proteins which can alter the biochemical reaction? Now, you know that the biochemical reaction as well as the signaling stuff, so both of them are carried out by either enzymes or through the signaling molecules, which are essentially proteins. Now, these proteins are generally coded by the gene. So then you wanted to understand, that is where you started to think that if I want to understand the life completely, I need to ask the question at the genomic level. So then you started sequencing the genomes, try to understand the genetic basis of the phenotypic or biochemical, endocrinological, physiological, anatomical, as well as morphological difference between the organism. So that is what we call it as genome-phenome relationship. So later you discovered that there is something called a central dogma. We have been studying it since ages. So genomes are the genes which will be get converted into mRNA. mRNA is the one which is going to convert it into proteins. Now, the thing is, most of the cases, genomes will not culminate into transcriptome. Not all the genes get expressed in all the cells. For example, if you come to the glucose metabolism itself, muscle is going to express a different kind of hexokinase, whereas liver is going to express a different kind of hexokinase. So some important, for example, if you come to the RBC cells, you don't have the payoff phase, same kind of payoff phase in the glycolysis as that of the muscle cell. So in the muscle cell, the payoff phase is, say, a 5-step reaction, whereas in the hemoglobin containing the RBC cell, it is a 6-phase, 6-step process when it comes to the payoff phase. Because of the presence of one single enzyme, there is an additional enzyme called as phosphofructokinase 2 and FBPS, or fructose bisphosphatase enzyme, bifunctional enzyme, that is expressing only in the red blood cell but nowhere else. So that means to say there is a tissue-specific expression. Not all the genes do express in all the conditions. So that's why you wanted to understand the holistic view of the transcriptome. When a signal is given to the cell, what are the different types of mRNA that it is going to express? So that is going to give you how the genome is behaving in response to a stimulus. So that is what is transcriptomics. Now then you discovered that there is something called as RNA interference, whereby not all the mRNA that is expressed is going to get converted into proteins. So that is why you wanted to establish the presence of one particular gene product at the proteomic level. So that's why you shifted on to proteomics and then metabolomics, because proteins are the ones which carry out the metabolism. Then you come to systems or network biology to have a holistic view of what is the signal, what are the different proteins which are interacting with each other to bring about one change at the systems level. So starting from a very minute or a very narrowistic view, you have gone up to systems level where on a broader scale you are trying to understand the behavior of the cell, and on the basis of which are all the proteins expressed, what are all the proteins interacting with each other, and what these proteins are doing while interacting with each other. So that is going to give you a holistic view. So as a result, each and every kind of steps, so that is going to generate a different types of data. You may have a sketch data, you may have a image data, you may have a spectrophotometrical data. Then the genomics, you have a sequence data. In proteomics, you have a sequence as well as structure data. You have a reaction data, and you have a protein-protein interaction data. So many different types of data you have generated. And when you have generated so many different types of data, you have to improve your computational capability to harbor such a huge amount of data and such a different types of data. You have a diversity in the data types as well as data volume also. So you have to generate, that's why I told you, you have to generate a very efficient computer which can store, manage, process, and disseminate the data. And you need a proper communication technology in order to disseminate the data, whatever you have collected. So in order to deliver, so you need to have a very good communication technology. So that is where the information technology comes into picture. So up to this part, it is most of the cases, it is hypothesis-driven research. Now, that is what I call it as a pre-genomic era, I can say, that is before the genome project started. Now, after this, I will call that component as a data-driven research. So where there is huge amount of data that is there available, freely available in the public domain. It is waiting for a brilliant minds to catch up those or catch those data and process it with a logic. So with the data, you come about a hypothesis, and that hypothesis you'll try to simulate in a computer. And after the simulation in the computer, you go for the designing the wet lab experiment, and one-step validation of wet lab experiment will tell you whether your hypothesis is good or hypothesis is bad. So that is where we start from the genome, we go to the proteome, we try to understand the genome as well as proteome interactions. So then we try to understand the molecular interactions, we try to understand the the proof of concept for any biochemical disorders, that is what we call it as a disease. So, and then we go for search for a new drugs, we study the genetic variation, all these things can be done with bioinformatics with the proper data handling and appropriate algorithm, good statistical model as well as visualization. So this is what I was telling you about, like you have a what you call biological knowledge and contradictory issues present in the public domain, and for that you do an initial literature survey and you collect the relevant data, and then using the data you develop a hypothesis. So this hypothesis, in order to once you get this hypothesis, you have to run a simulation, dry lab simulation, and then you go for systems analysis and theory formation, then prediction, then using that you go for one step or experimental design for wet lab for validation of whatever your hypothesis is. Then you conduct your wet lab experiment, then you generate a new data. This new data serves as a feed for the next cycle. So this part is about computation, this part is about analysis, and this part from prediction, wet lab experiment should be taken care of by the technology, and this is by the genomics. Now, if you come to the map of bioinformatics, so you can see starting from the experiment that is going to give you a new data. So, and then handling the new data with the instrumentation, using the information technology and computational capability for generating the mathematical as well as statistical and physical models for the existing data through which you can generate a new hypothesis. So at all the levels, you can see this is at the DNA level, then from genome level, you can go for proteome level, from proteome level to go for metabolic level, pathway level, and then you can go for network level, then you can go for physiological level or cellular level, then you can go for species or organ level, then at ecological level, right? So all these things are there. All these things are there. Now, at all these levels of biology, with all these levels at the information technology, what and all you can do, right? So, at experiment as well as hardware and instrumentation level, at the DNA level, you can go for genome sequencing, develop a new hardware and a better efficient data capturing technology for scoring the DNA bases whenever they are sequenced. Then at the computation level, whatever the data coming from the genomic project, you can go for genome data analysis, and from this you can generate a field called as a statistical genetics. So from here you can go for asking different questions with the existing data. I'll give you an example how we ask different types of questions with the existing data to bring about the knowledge, right? At the proteomics level, you can generate the functional genomics, then microarray, 2D page, etc., etc. So, and then with that, you can go for protein structure prediction, protein dynamics, protein folding and design analysis softwares, right? And then you can also, with the help of information technology, you can go for data standard and data representation. The rules for data representation and data standard generation, as well as the repositories which can harbor all this data, right? And then you can go for integrating these two data along with the expression data. You can go for dynamic systems modeling. So dynamic systems modeling will help you in order to identify the biomarkers. So Dr. Jai Huskari will be talking about this systems modeling. Probably I saw his brochure. So, and then at the ecology level, you can go for computational ecology. That means to say, with the help of your computational solutions, So you can simulate a biological system at different levels of organization of biological system. So you can simulate at the nucleus level where DNA sequencing you can use. You can use it. You can simulate it at the proteomic level. You can simulate at the metabolic pathway level. You can simulate at the signaling level. You can simulate at the cellular level, organism level, as well as at the ecological level. So all these things are a different level of complexity of biology, and all this level of complexity, what are all the computational solutions you can offer for the biological community so that they can use these computational solutions for a proper simulation and coming up with a data-driven hypothesis. So that is why I told you I have a lot of respect for you engineers, because you people are creative animals, because you never stop thinking how to contribute to the society. So of course the demand comes from the biology, but solution always comes from the engineering. Right. So continuing this argument itself, I'll give you a brief brief example here with the annual report of European Bioinformatics Institute data resource. So they have recently published their annual report in 2019 nucleic acid research edition. So you can see at the literature service you have biostudies as well as Europe PMC databases, which serves you huge amount of freely available existing literature which you can study for your research problem, understanding the previous development in your field of research problem. Now, if you come to the molecular archives, so European Nucleotide Archive is there, European Variation Archive is there. This is just like DBVAR of NCBI, where variation of genetic component or single nucleotide polymorphism data is available. Then you have European Genome Phenome Archive. You have experimental factor ontology. So this is the one which is going to give you the brief description about the molecular function, biological activity, as well as cellular component of every proteins that is available. Then you can have mouse resources also along with the human resources. Then coming to the genome level, at the genome level, you have several databases like 1000 Genome Database, Ensemble Database, Ensemble Genome Database, Genome-wide Association Studies Catalog, HGNC Database, Vector-based, Worm-based. So Worm-based is just a genome database of your fruit fly. Now, when it comes to the gene expression, I told you, gene expression database, you have ArrayExpress database, Expression Atlas, and Pride database here. Now, at the protein level, you have Enzyme Portal, GOA, Magnify, Interpro, PFAM, RFAM. So all these are the protein domain database, whereas this is exclusively for enzyme present in different organisms. Whereas UniProt is a knowledge base where it is having a curated information about the protein sequence of whatever the so far genome completed organisms are there. So those protein sequences are available, curated information is available at UniProt knowledge base. Now that is about the sequence. Now if you want to study the structure of the protein, okay, you have the database like Protein Data Bank in Europe, that is PDBE knowledge base. Then you have electron microscopy data bank also, because earlier there was only two methods available for protein structure prediction. One is X-ray diffraction as well as in a nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. But nowadays you have cryo-electron microscopy also, which will aid to resolve the protein structure. So that's why you have a separate database for electron microscopy data bank. Then MPR is also there. Then for small molecule, if you want to find out a suitable ligand for your enzyme, what you think is the reason for some kind of ailment, and you want to inhibit that enzyme, you have a whole chemoinformatics solution available at the EBI. You have Chembl, then metabolites, then you have all the other resources for small molecular analysis. Now using all these data, if you want to model the biochemical network or signaling network or protein-protein interaction network, you have biomodels database, Intact database, Omics DI, as well as Reactome. Reactome is a database containing the biochemical reaction present, This is going to give you information about biochemical reactions, metabolic reactions, as well as signaling protein-protein interaction data. With respect to tissue also, you can recover from this reactome. Whereas INTACT is purely, it is a protein-protein interaction database. There is a difference here. This will give you extra information about what kind of reaction that they carry out. This will tell you only which protein A interacts with which protein B. So that's the main difference between these two databases. So all these databases have been recently upgraded with new kind of, whatever the new data that they have acquired over a period of time. Now, if you look at with all these things, you can see a steady growth of data in terms of petabytes, right? So huge amount of data that is being deposited over a period of time. So you can see at present you have 160 petabyte storage at EMBL EBI alone. I am talking about only about EMBL EBI, whereas you have a whole different space issue at NCBI. Okay, so NCBI is one more database just like EBI. So that is National Center for Biotechnology Information. That's a server present in America. This is present in Europe. Now you can see by platform, if you go for, so you can see there is a steady increase in the nucleotide sequence data. So this is the nucleotide sequence or completed genome information. So as the genomes and genes are being sequenced and they are deposited. So the data you can see there is a steady increase in the nucleotide sequence. So that means that on a daily basis the nucleotide sequencing or genome sequencing happening at any given point of time. Now at the same time you can see from the 2007 itself you have a huge number of mass spectrophotometry data is also going on. So this is the post-genomic era, and 2005-06 is the one where the people started thinking about the sequencing of proteins with the help of tandem mass spectra, as well as high throughput identification of metabolites present in the cells using the mass spectra, even high throughput identification of proteins in the clinical samples also being invented at that particular point of time. So that's why there is when you compare these two data, you can see there is a very marked increase in the mass spectrophotometry data. On the contrary, you don't have a much amount of growth present in microarray data, because now microarray has become something like obsolete technology. Nobody think about microarray because everybody is indulged in NGS. NGS is more economical and it will tell you more story when compared to your classical microarray experiment, and where microarray is an indirect measurement of gene expression, whereas NGS you can go for direct measurement of genes when you go for exome sequencing. So that's why you can see that when you compare to the these two curves, the curve of microarray is almost stagnant. Now, at the same time, you can come to the data growth at EMBL EBI. You can see Array Express, which is at quite stagnant. Then you can see EGA. So here is your EGA. ENA is European Nucleotide Archive. So you can see here EGA is Genomic Archive. Okay, so there is people are constantly or actively doing the genome sequencing. That's why you can see a very good growth here. Then at the protein identification also, that is the PRIDE database. So you can see more kind of vigorous growth in here. So you can if you compare the growth of ENA as well as growth of PRIDE, you can see both of them, they are having the same kind of growth. So that means to say people are more concentrating both on the genome sequencing as well as the protein identification. Now, if you come to the data growth in metabolites, where people are concentrating more on identification of metabolites, you can see from after 2012, you have a very high growth. So that is where the systems biology came into prominence, right? So most of the people are now going for developing the solutions, computational solutions for the rapid and high throughput capturing of the metabolites expressed during one particular condition in a cell, and depositing that metabolite or whole metabolome, what we call it as. So those metabolome information, and using that metabolome, people are trying to go for systems level modeling of the cell, how the cell is going to behave, what is the metabolic dynamic of the cell when it is responding to some kind of data, some kind of stimulus. So all this data, you can see it is being harbored and managed and processed by 34,000 crores, out of it 27 high throughput crores, whereas 27,000 high performance cores. So that is the computational aspect of it. And for data sharing, you have a 100 gigabit backbone within the data center and multiple 10 gigabit connection between the data centers present at the EBI headquarters itself. So the demand of the data that is generated by the biological side always drive the innovation as well as research on the engineering side. So people are very creative. Of course, we keep you on your foot, but at the same time, people are very creative and come up with the new solutions always, making it a proprietary technology, which can help us for better storage, better management, and better processing of the data. So, having said that, I'm going to tell you the places where you can find different types of data with one of the very small project that our students of MSc did here. So how with the existing data you can come up with a hypothesis, and you can just do a simulation, and you can still go for a wet lab design. Of course, I'm not going to include the wet lab design here. I'm going to tell you only the dry lab part because that is the focus of this task. Now, I am very much interested in understanding the protein evolution, where proteins do evolve by the acquiring the new domain that I'm going to tell you in a few further slides. So this is a very basic setup of a protein. Proteins are always made up of alpha helices as well as beta sheets. So this is what we call it as a motif. A motif is a basic structural as well as functional unit of a cell, or you can also call it as an evolutionary backbone of a protein, because all the proteins, whatever they evolve, they try to mix these motifs in different fashions. I'll give you an example. You take this beta alpha beta loop and arrange several such copy of this beta alpha beta loop in a barrel shape. That is what we call it as Tim barrel domain, or this is the structure of the protein triose phosphate isomerase. So basically, it is the amalgamation of 6 to 7 copies of the beta alpha beta motif arranged in a circular fashion, where at the tip where you can find these loops that will make the active site, and these alpha helix as well as beta sheets, they will provide the backbone support. Now, the motifs, the arrangement of motifs or the amalgamation of these motifs are called as domain. So essentially, the protein is made up of a domain. So domain is the structural, functional, as well as evolutionary unit of a protein. Now, take the example of these two proteins. One is flavohemoprotein, the other one is putative flavohemoprotein. Now you can see here, you have two domains present. If you take this particular sequence and analyze, you will find the globin domain along with the NAD binding domain. In this one also you have NAD binding domain. The globin domain, you take this organism further, you take this argument further, you take the help of the example of myoglobin. So myoglobin is made up of globin domain. alone, only globin domain is there. If you attach one more domain, that is NAD binding domain, that will become flamohemoprotein. So when you have two domains attached together, that can largely influence the function of a protein. So this is what the two domains in organism one, and during the evolution, these two domains, they can come and fuse together. So individual proteins that are present as a fused proteins in another organisms are called Rosetta Stone sequences. So when these two domains, they fuse it with each other to form a single polypeptide chain with two active sites. So that is what we call it as Rosetta Stones. So many of these individual proteins are shown to be involved in the same pathway as demonstrated in E. coli and indicating their functional synergy. So if you want to understand more about this, you can go for these two papers. So this is actually my main motivation. So there is one more paper where the Rosetta Stones, whether they are chance or necessity. So when you are having an evolutionary framework, and during the evolution, the organisms are going to acquire a new gene, and the genome is getting bigger, right? So when you say that genome is going to bigger, whether it is also also important that the protein is also going to get bigger. Now, when I say domain is a integral part, the functional, structural, as well as evolutionary unit of a protein, whether the number of increase in the protein essentially mean the number of different types of domains are also being formed, right? So somebody has done it with a very simple experiment of your very simple statistical model, right? And they have shown that it follows a specific pattern where the organisms, they evolve their genome, they evolve their proteins, but the number of domains remain the same. The number of domains is not going to increase. So how you can evolve a protein without increasing the number of domains? Because you can see when you have two domains here, you may have a repetition of the same domain again. So this is going to alter the structure of the protein, and as a result, function of the protein can also get altered. Now at the same time, you can have an insertion of one more domain C, right? So as a result, now this protein contains 4 domains rather than 3 domains. Now these proteins also behave differently. At the same time, you may have an exchange of the domain where C is exchanged with D. Now, as a result, the composition of this protein also differs. And at the same time, you can have a deletion of a domain itself. You can see here, the A is being deleted. Now, as a result, the function of this protein also varies. I can give you one more example, better if you look at here. So what is common in all these things is SH2 and SH3 domain. SH2 as well as SH3 domain. You can see in SRC, if you see only one SH2 domain and SH3 domain is there along with the kinase. But here, when it comes to GRB2, you have 2 SH3 domain and 1 SH2 domain. In NCK, you have 3 SH3 domain and 1 SH3 domain. So this is the example for duplication, domain duplication. Now earlier it was SH2, SH3 and kinase domain. Now if you come to SHP2, you have 2 SH2 and 1 PTPS domain. So this is an example where you can exchange the domain, at the same time you can delete the SH2 domain, right? So likewise, by the duplication, deletion, exchange, right? So all these different types of phenomenon, through all these different types of phenomenon, you can generate a wide variety or wide range of different types of protein, keeping the same domains. So that is very, very remarkable feature of your protein evolution. So I am very much interested in understanding this kind of phenomenon. So I gave a very small, what do you call it? Very small objective to our students. So what is that? If you take an example of dihydropyridine reductase enzyme, you have only two domains, globin and NAD binding. Now, if you take the example of flavohemoglobin domain, it is having globin, FAD binding as well as NAD binding domain. So that means to say now the globin is not only binding with NAD binding domain, the globin can also bind with FAD binding domain. In this case, globin can interact or can fuse with two different types of domain. So that is what we call it as tethering number. So if a domain has a greater tethering number, that means to say it can fuse with various different types of domains. So as a result, the versatility of this domain increases exponentially. That means to say this domain contributes for a very versatile, very high number and highly versatile protein array of an organism. Now that is what is about. There are two different aspects, that is duplication, which leads to the abundance, and recombination that leads to the versatility. So you can see these are the different domains where this domain is in very high number. So that means to say this domain is frequently occurring. Out of, say, you have a 10,000 proteins expressed by an organism, and all these proteins you collect and identify, try to identify the domains, you can see one domain which is reoccurring very frequently. So that is what we call it as abundant domain. So in all the organisms, you will see this kind of phenomenon. Some domains will be very frequently abundant, and some domains are very, very less in occurrence. Now, at the same time, you can also find a phenomenon where one kind of domain is going to fuse with so many different types of other domains. So that is what in the previous slide I told you is about versatility. So you can observe both of these phenomenon when you analyze one particular proteome. Now, the problem that I gave to my students is you compare the proteome of Streptococcus pneumonia as well as Klebsiella pneumonia, because Streptococcus pneumonia is one of the very highly so many people have died because of pneumonia. You can see in India, right? So this is mainly happens when you people are very sick and admitted to hospital. So this is going to kill almost 1 lakh children under the age of 5, according to WHO report. Now this is very prevalent, and the problem is you can find more when you are hospitalized. Now, at the same time, you have Klebsiella pneumonia on the other hand. So where 60% of the deaths in India, childhood pneumonia in India, are attributed to the Klebsiella pneumonia. That is also Nast familial infections. So both of these organisms, both Streptococcus pneumonia as well as Klebsiella pneumonia, so they belong to different classification. They belong to different groups altogether if you go to biological classification. But both of them, they are going to affect the same, they are showing the same disease conditions, they affect the same organs or something, right? So what I hypothesized is whether you can find out one good protein which is very important for both of organism, which is present in both the organism and which shares the same kind of structure. There is no much structural alteration in both organism. You have to find out one good protein which is present in both organism, which has the same protein sequence and more or less same protein structure, at least at the active site level. They should have the same kind of protein structure. Now, if I identify out of so much amount of proteins, if I identify that particular protein, then with a single drug, I can knock out both the organisms. So that is the idea. So what I'm trying to ask a question is whether there is a druggable protein present in both the organism, which is not only sequentially conserved but also structurally conserved. Now, in order to do that, I need to go and shop my data at different shopping malls. So I started out. So the objectives of the project was like the collection of data set of putative proteins, then domain search and cataloging, domain-based re-annotation, identification of druggable protein, and you go for 3D modeling, then if possible you do a virtual screening. So all these are the objectives. Now, the first thing is the collection of the data. Now, before going to any research, it is very advisable that you do a proper research survey or literature survey. So that is where you need the literature databases, the repositories where you can have the access to thousands and lakhs together of papers which are freely available to you or through your institutional logins. So that is where these literature repositories will help you. So this is the pipeline. So we did some literature survey, and based upon that, we selected these two organism strains, especially. So then we collected the protein sequence of proteome sequences. Then we try to identify the domains and list of domains which are common in both the organism. Then you do the PSI-BLAST, delta-BLAST, all this. I'll explain you in subsequent slides. And whatever the proteins that comes, we analyze for its druggability. Then whichever the proteins we found out they are druggable, then we went for a modeling or 3D modeling, developing the 3D models. And then we evaluated the model, we predicted the active sites, and once the active site is predicted, we minimize the protein with the local minima, and then we went for the virtual screening for identification of potential inhibitors, and we used BioVia for visualization and all other analysis. Now, when you come to the literature, that's what I told you. The very first step of any research is to have a proper knowledge of your domain. What are all the development that has taken place in your field of research or field of problem? So generally, I don't advise people to go for the papers which are very like published somewhere around 1970 or something like, because the technology as well as knowledge are obsolete. Every 6 months you need to update your bioinformatics as well as computational and biological knowledge, right? So that is why I always advise people to go for literature survey at least 5 years and reset. So if I am taking a research problem in 2020, I should rely more on the reviews as well as research papers which are published at least by 2015 and onwards, not before that, because whatever the thing that were published or established in 2010 or 2005 or something like, nowadays may become obsolete. So that's why I always request all of you to go for, if you want to do a research survey, literature survey, you at least collect the reviews as well as literatures that are collected only after 2015 or 5 years gap you can take. So this is my favorite place where I can find out innumerable number of available literature. This is PubMed at National Library of Medicine, right? So, and then you can have EuroPMC. This is given by EBI database. I told you in the previous slide. So EuroPMC is PubMed Central at Europe. So this is also the PubMed Central variation of PubMed, and this database contain the freely available journals. So this is going to give you whatever the journal that you can find here is freely available. You can free to download. You don't need to pay any money. Now at the same time you can have academia. So this is another kind of venture where you can, if you create an account in academia and you select your field of interest, they will send you as and when a new paper is published. So it is indexed automatically and they will send you a mail link so that you can visualize the, you can view the paper abstract, and if you're interested, you can go for download. Either it is It is free or it is paid also, but most of the time it is free, you can say. Then you have Digital Library of Commons. This is another my favorite place where this is hosted by Indiana University. Now you can create your own account, and using that credentials, login credential, you can access close to 74,000 different types of journals, accounting for millions of papers which are freely available for download. And one more is Science Open. I don't know how many of you have heard about this thing, because it is very recent, and you can have access over 64 million publication. And here you can customize your search with a focused kind of settings. You can improve your keyword and searching capability so that you will get only the specific papers of your interest. And you have one more called as ERIC. This is here you can find, if you are interested only in the peer-reviewed journals, you can take the peer-reviewed journals only. You can filter it out from the network. Okay, somebody is having any question? I'm hearing some voice. Anybody want to ask a question? Hello? Actually, I'm not able to hear you. Can you please post the question in your chat box? Please post your question in the chat box. Please post your question in the chat box. Hello? 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 I can hear somebody is talking, and please, since I cannot hear your voice, please post your, or else please mute your microphone, please. Okay. So, to the question asked by Dr. P. Aruna Devi, Madam, you can download all the publication at free of cost, provided you have a user credential at Academia. So Academia, if you can also set up, there is a setting for mailing. So whenever there is a free publication available in the field of your interest, they will send a link to you so that you can just follow the link and you can download it. Or you can sync it with your Google Drive. If you don't want to waste your laptop space, you can sync that into your Google Drive and it will go to your Google Drive. So I have made that kind of settings so that the click of a button, it will save into your Google Drive. So having said that, when I was searching for the literature out of all these places, I came about a wonderful paper which was published in 2005, which is basic idea that I got, the evolution of domain arrangement in protein and interaction network. So that was published way back in 2005, and based upon this particular idea, we searched several papers. As I said earlier, we searched several papers after 2013 because this work was done way back in 2016. So we collected the papers pertaining to our problem from 2013 onwards. Sorry, 2012 onwards. Then the next question is, where do I collect my protein sequence data? Or if I am interested in to identify finding the protein, druggable protein, you can analyze, it's about your imagination, how you want to go and approach the problem. So you can go by the genome analysis itself. There are several papers saying by comparative genome alignment itself, some people have come about with proteins which are potential of being a drug target. Now, at the same time, some people have used the nucleotide sequence and some people have used the protein sequence data. But since I am interested in domain rearrangement and recombination events, I am more interested in protein sequence data. Now, if you want to go by nucleotide sequence data, you can come to GenBank database. So GenBank database is the genetic sequence database at NCBI, right? So it has is a part of International Nucleotide Sequence Database Collaboration, INSDC we call it as, which comprises the DNA Data Bank of Japan and European Nucleotide Archive and GenBank at NCBI. All the three organizations exchange the data on a daily basis. So you submit a sequence at ENA or DDBJ, so it will be available tomorrow at GenBank also. So this is what you call, if you compare like Westside, Pantaloons and Shopperstop, this is like Shopperstop for all the genomic information. So you preferably go to Shopperstop for your merchandise. So this is just like a Shopperstop. Now similarly, you have ENA, that is European Nucleotide Archive. It is exclusively the nucleotide sequence browser by EBI database. And similarly, for proteins, if you come to, you can say it is UniProt KB. So there is a difference between the archive, nucleotide archive, and when you say something called as a KB. So KB is knowledge base. So whenever you see something called as a KB, knowledge base, you should understand that is a curated database. You have extensive information pertaining to one particular protein of interest. So that's what is called as a knowledge base. Then for protein, only protein, you can come to GenPept database. So where you can browse so many protein sequences. And if you want to download the genome itself, better you come to Ensemble. Of course, you have UCSC genome browser and other things, but Ensemble will be an ideal place if you want to go for or download a huge database itself onto your system. This is very, very good place. Now, at the same time, if you are working on lower organisms like fungi, bacteria, lower organisms, not like plants as well as animals, multicellular organism. If you want to go for the single cell organisms and lower organism, you better come to NCBI taxonomy browser. But if you want to go for analysis of higher genome or higher organism genome, you better visit Ensemble Genome. Now, this is the what you call ideal shopping place for all your bacterial genome. Now, if you come here and if you give the name in the search for this Streptococcus pneumoniae D39, this is what I had interested in, because the earlier paper I showed you, 2005 paper, they have done the research based upon this genome, and this is the newly evolved Streptococcus pneumoniae virulent strain. So that's why we took this particular strain. So if you search it here in the taxonomy browser, you can see how many information pertaining to this organism you can see here. So this is going to code for 4,320 proteins, and you have one single genome. That means to say only nuclear genome, it doesn't have a plasmid genome. Now you have expression dataset also, 403 expression datasets you have, and very high impact factor, 14 high impact factor, freely available papers are available at PubMed Central, right? And so on and so forth. So many different types of information is available. Now with a single click of a button, if you want to have a genome, you can download it. Just click on this thing and the entire genome will be displayed you and you can download it. Or if you want to collect only the protein sequences, you click on here, it will get downloaded to your system. Now, once you get your proteins, I told you that I am interested in understanding the organization of domains in the proteins. Now, if you want to identify the organization and domain composition of different proteins, now you can come to different databases. So out of which conserved domain database is a very favorite one, because you can go by searching for a single protein sequence, or in a batch series search, all the 4,320 protein sequence you can submit at a time, and it will send the results to your mail with the link, and you can go to that link and download the domain architecture. Now, at the same time, SMART is another database, but only problem here is you cannot go for a batch search. You have to go for individual domain searching. You can input one sequence at a time. That is the problem of SMART database. Now, this is another one, ProSite database, another domain database. But what this is containing is something called as position-specific scoring matrix. So these databases have been created based upon different data models. So somebody will ask about the frequency of occurrence of amino acids. Somebody will be creating based upon the profile hidden Markov models. So best example is your PFAM. So PFAM is the one which is created based upon protein hidden Markov models. So however, this also help you in identifying the domains. So you have a wide range of choice. You can come to CDD. Once again, this is also created based upon position specific scoring matrix. So then you can have, you can come and look at SMART database, you can come at ProSite database, you can come at PFAM database. So all these databases at the same time, Interpro database is also there, Ideal database is there, right? So all these are the different databases. You can come wherever you feel comfortable. Okay. So, however, all this gives you extensive information about the domains present in your proteins. Now, once you analyze the domain composition of your proteins, the second thing is identifying the list of domains which are common between the two organisms that you have taken. So you have a proteome of Klebsiella pneumonia, you have the proteome of Streptococcus pneumonia. So between these two genomes, how many domains are common? And then the thing is, how many domains are common here? Now, out of how many common domains, how many of them are known, with known function? So if you don't know the function, then you have to go for reannotation of the protein. That is based upon the domain-based reannotation of the protein. For that, you have to do a position-specific iterated BLAST and followed by delta BLAST. Delta BLAST is done to ensure that whatever the proteins that you have identified in the pathogens is not present in the humans. So whatever the protein that you identified here, they should not be present in human. If you design an inhibitor for a protein which shares a structure as well as function in the host, you're not only killing the pathogen, but at the same time, you're also doing some damage to the host organism. So you have to make sure that these domains as well as proteins are present only in the bacteria, but not present in the host. And then followed by you do the domain-based reannotation. And out of these things, the next question is, okay, I have got these n number of proteins which are having no homology with the humans or the host, and I have reannotated. Reannotation is a process where the proteins whose function was not previously known will be assigned with a function with the help of computational solutions. So either by looking at the domain and understanding what the domain is going to do, because when you go for the PFAM, if you look at here, right? So this is going to give you the brief description about the domain, what it is going to do, right? So that is what we call it as domain-based annotation, right? Or you can go for SciBLAST, where the protein which is coming here will be subjected to the similarity search against the relative or related organisms, where you can find out find out the proteins which are having the same position specific scoring matrix. So that's what is PSI BLAST, position specific iterated blast. So now when the position specific scoring matrix of some remote organism is same with this particular protein that you have just identified, so if both of them are similar, you can assign the function of that protein directly onto this protein. So that is what we call it as reannotated protein. Now, when you have a list of reannotated protein, the next question you are going to ask is whether they are druggable. Now, the problem here is when you say a protein is a druggable, it has to have some kind of characteristic. Now, when you say something called as a target for a disease, so you are addressing it depends on the disease that you are going to address. There are two broad kind of diseases. One is infective diseases. The other one is inborn errors or inborn diseases like diabetes and cancer. So diabetes, then you have hypertension, cardiac arrest. So all these things are inborn errors. Whereas, this COVID, the popular nowadays, he is the superstar. So the COVID as well as tuberculosis, pneumonia, so all these things are infective diseases. Now, when you are addressing an infective disease, your definition of a drug target or a druggable protein is that a protein which should be available or which should have a very high bioavailability. That means your drug should easily find out that protein, bind to that protein, and inhibit that protein. Remember, in infectious disease, you always pick up a protein to knock it down, not to regulate its function, but to inhibit its function. Now, once you inhibit the protein, that means that protein should be inevitable for the survival of the organism. It should be inevitable for the survival of the organism, where knocking out that protein will lead to the death of the organism. It should be the death of the organism. So that is very important characteristic when you define a drug target. Now, in this case, if I am asking the question out of so many proteins reannotated, which is my druggable protein, that means I am trying to find out a protein which is very crucial in a metabolic network. So knocking out of which is going to knock out the organism by shutting down a very crucial metabolic pathway. So that is the druggability assessment. Now, and after that, once I identify this druggable protein, the second thing is, can I get a three-dimensional structure from the sequence? So that is where several modeling server as well as software comes into picture. Now, using the modeling servers, you can generate the 3D model from the sequences, and you have to evaluate that the models that you got, whether it is a good model or a bad model or something else. And once the model is good, you confirm that you have a good model, you can go for CASP server or active set prediction server. Now, once you have an active set predicted, then you can go for virtual screening. Now, in the virtual screening, you can identify the potential inhibitor for your protein. And once you get the results, you can visualize with so many different types of visualizers. That is the general pipeline. Now, if you want to identify the druggable protein, you have several servers, PokeDrug, then you have DrugPred, right? And then you have druggability server, then you have, right? So then DLID, there is one more server called as DLID, PokeDrug, then DrugPred. At the same time, you have druggability, out of which this is my favorite, druggability. However, this has been discontinued right now. From 2019 onwards, it has been discontinued. But you can visit this particular website, PokeDrug, for pocket druggability prediction. This is going to give you very nice kind of results. Now, once you do that, then I told you after the druggability, I'm going to model the proteins, right? So these are the different computational solutions in the form of servers. So you can go for RaptorX, Biscuit, Easy3Pred, FoldX, so on. So Swift model is the most popular among all the things. If you want to go for standalone software, the Modeler is the one. This is freely available. All these are free to use server except Rabeta. Okay, so this is a commercial server. At the same time, Yasser also. All these things, they do the prediction based upon different statistical method. Now, once I told you that, once I predict, then the next thing is to search for the potential ligand binding site, nothing but the active site. Now, there are several websites where you can go for active site identification. I can say this is one of the most beautiful server present at IIT Delhi. So for active site prediction, they are going to give you the XYZ coordinate also, along with the list of amino acid present in an active site. Then you have binding pocket and pocket ligand database at VALS3D.com. Then you have ZangLab, where there is something called as a coach, where you can have protein ligand binding site prediction. Then you can have the 3D ligand site. This is another server which will help you to identify the active site. And a group of scientists from Protein Data Bank, that's a protein structure server at ABI, they have created this particular new server called as PROBIS server from 2015. So this also will help you with identification of protein active site. Now, out of all these servers, right? So I forgot to mention about one more thing. This is CASP server, Computed Atlas for surface topology of proteins. This is the very first server which was published serving for active site prediction. So if you follow this particular website, you have a compendium of different pocket prediction servers, and along with the brief description, it is also available. Now, once you do identify your active site, the next thing is to go for virtual screening. Now, virtual screening you can either do on your computer downloading the software, or you can just submit to a server and be happy, because they will take all the pain of running a program, setting the parameters and running a program, and they will just mail you the results and you are happy. Just submit your protein as well as select the database, and then they will do the rest of the things. And some servers are paid, some servers are free. So you have there are so many servers, but I am going to tell you only two servers here. One is MIT OpenScreen. This is by Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So this is one very important and very user-friendly server for virtual screening. This basically runs on an Autodoc engine. So Autodoc is a very famous open source, freely available docking software. So that has been made engine for so many softwares also, like Pyrix. There is one very important software called as PYRX, Pyrix. So that's also virtual screening software. You can download it onto your computer and do the virtual screening. However, it is paid. So that's what I was talking about here. Since we are Indians, we always think about how to save the money. So that's why I am going to tell you only those things which you can use it for free. So the second server, what I am very fond of, is drug discovery at TACC. So this is a very beautiful server which runs on a Jaguar supercomputer. And you have a separate estate which has been created for this TACC of, say, one very big plot with 3,400 cores are there. Here you have to, it is mandatory for you to create a username and password. With the credential you can log in, and you can submit your protein. Once you submit your protein, this is going to check for the possible ligands in both the synthetic ligand as well as the bioactive compounds or natural ligands. So this screens for the zinc database, zinc natural database. That means zinc database is a small molecular database where zinc natural is the small molecular database where the molecules are from the natural origin, plants or animals. At the same time, this is going to search for TCM database, traditional Chinese medicine database. There's also a natural library, compound library. Now, at the same time, at the synthetic library database also, it searches for the potential inhibitor for whatever the protein that you have submitted to the server in 3 to 4 database, and based upon their binding energy, it will sort it out rank wise, and then they will give you the result in the form of a RAR file with all the ligands, at least 50 ligands they will give you. So based upon the binding energy, you can select your ligand and go for further whatever the analysis you want to do. Now you can see when I compared these two genomes, I found this particular domain which is very much abundant when in out of these two genomes. So that is GFO, IDH, MOCA. So when I inquired about this protein, so I identified that this particular protein is the one which is going to code for inositol 2 dehydrogenase. So these are the list of proteins which are re-annotated in Streptococcus pneumoniae, and this is in Klebsiella pneumoniae. So this is the domain which is reoccurring with a very great abundance in both the genomes. Remember, I told you that my objective is to find out one good protein which is present, structurally conserved and sequentially conserved, and both of them in both the genome it should be the druggable protein. So that is what is my aim in this particular aspect. So that is why I selected this particular enzyme, because this is containing this particular domain, GFO, IDH, MOCA domain, which is highly abundant in both the domain, in both the genome. So then what I do is whether it is druggable protein. I told you, remember, druggable protein is defined as a protein knocking out which it should knock down multiple proteins connected to it. I told you that the protein never works in isolation. It always interacts with different proteins. That's the idea of systems biology as well as metabolomics, right? So if you look at here, this is the protein of interest. See here, this is going to coordinate the proteins of, function of so many proteins. So if I knock this down, these proteins network cannot communicate with each other. This is the gateway for information flow from this network and that network. If I knock it down, now there is no communication between these things. So as a result, you can shut down the entire metabolic network. So if you want to understand or if you want to retrieve such kind of information, how the protein is interacting with other proteins, you can visit all these databases: String, BioGrid, Intact, MIPS, Reactome, HPRD, NetPath, Bind, DIP. So all these are the protein-protein interaction databases. You can go all these databases to retrieve this kind of information. Now, once I know that this is my protein of interest, but you see there is two different type of representation. In some node, you have some kind of protein structure visible, but here such kind of structure is not visible. That means to say the structure of this protein has not yet been deduced, right? So then you have to model your structure. Now for that, you can go for Swiss model or any other model server. So I went for Swiss model and generated this particular structure, and that with the help of PDBsum, I found out that this model is very, very good. You can see that this is the Ramachandran plot where this is the allowed region. The yellow color is the relaxed and the extra allowed region. So all your amino acids are falling under the allowed region. That means to say this particular structure is good. Now the next question I told you, it should be structurally and sequentially conserved in both the data, both the genomes, both Klebsiella pneumoniae as well as Streptococcus pneumoniae. So that is why this protein I took and found out an ortholog in Streptococcus pneumoniae, and both the structure I superimposed. So when superimposed, you can see almost all the beta sheets as well as alpha helices, they are overlapping with each other with not much of root mean square deviation. That means to say they are neatly overlapping with each other. That means to say the sequences are not only sequentially conserved but also structurally conserved. Now, if you want to go for structure superimposition, you can use the fast server, multiplot server, superpose server, SLine, K2SA, Dalite, and protein 3D fit, then 3D coffee, Promal 3 SD. So all these are the servers which are available for protein structure superimposition, where I used superpose database. I can recommend this particular database. It's very easy to use, user friendly, and the results are also easily understandable by the user, right? Now you can visit this particular web address to get a compendium of all these servers and brief description of these servers. Now, once I know that I have hit a jackpot, because out of 4,320 proteins, I have narrowed down to one single protein, which is having a domain which is abundant in both the genome, and this is an ortholog in both the genome. This is sequence is conserved in both the genome, and also structure is also conserved in both the genome. Now the thing is, if I design one good inhibitor for this particular protein, it can inhibit both the organism. It can kill both the organism. So that is what my aim was. So with that, I went for virtual screening at TACC database. So you see, I told you that it searches for TCM database as well as zinc database. So this is the ID in the TCM database, traditional Chinese medicine database. So this is the ID of the compound, serial number of the compound, and you can see that there is a very good binding affinity. The least binding affinity, the better it is. So once you identify the ligand, you have to do a safety test also, whether it is mutagenic, whether it is tumorigenic, whether it is going to interfere with your reproductive system, whether it is going to be an irritant. Now, one which passes all these tests, you can choose it as a ligand of your interest. You can say this is my interested ligand, and at the same time, this has searched for zinc database also. You can see more or less the same kind of binding energy, minus 9.5, and this is also safe for the consumption, right? So then I used BioVia for identification of ligand and protein interaction. You can see that my ligand has bound to this particular inositol 2 dehydrogenase enzyme with so many multiple hydrogen bonds. So as a result, there will be a stable-ish kind of interaction between the ligand as well as the protein. Because of the stable reaction, stable interaction, this enzyme is definitely going to be inhibited. So what I was trying to tell you out of all these slides is that you have to have a proper kind of idea or problem once you select. So you design a pipeline, and for every step of the pipeline, you have a lot of computational resources available, right? So hope I have told you, starting from the data collection, then so many resources are there. So for genes, genomes, proteins, as well as domains, if you want to identify, then you go for identification of druggable protein, then modeling if you want to do, active site prediction if you want to do, then you can go for you can go for active site prediction, you can go for virtual screening. So many databases are present, and it is. So basically, what I want to tell you is there is huge amount of data and databases present, publicly available, waiting for the bright minds to explore them. So now is an era of data-driven research. The more meaningful question that you ask with the data, the better knowledge you will get. So what I recommend you to, before you start with any kind of research problem, first you need to design, first you need to do a proper literature survey And based upon that, whenever you design a pipeline, first you look at for the data which is available in the database and use a proper pipeline. And there are so many freely available servers as well as softwares are there. Use them with a wisdom, then come up with a hypothesis. Now, what is my hypothesis out of this work? My hypothesis is out of all these things, this is my ligand of interest which can inhibit. Now I can design a wet lab and see whether actually this particular ligand can inhibit this thing, and inhibiting this thing, whether it is going to kill both the organism or not. So that is what is my hypothesis. I can design a single set of wet lab experiment, and I can prove it with the wet lab experiment whether I'm going to kill the organism. Now, if I am able to kill that organism, then you can take it for future drug development process. So this work was done by two of my students, like Ms. Purnima, who is pursuing her PhD at Enappa University in Bangalore, and Ms. Jayashree, who did recently her PhD, Perfect Husband Discovery. Now, this work was not possible without Dr. Sandip Telkar, who is a Lady Tata Memorial Postdoc Fellow at the Department of Biotechnology, Kumar University, because he is the one who gave his login credential to me for drug discovery at TSEC virtual screening server. So with that, I thank you for your patience hearing. And if you are interested, if you want to ask any question, I am very happy. I will be very happy to answer. Okay, if I am audible to you, I am requesting once again, if you have any questions, please shoot me the question. I will try to answer your questions. So for which are the reference books to refer? Actually, I don't, Dr. Swati, I don't recommend you to go for reference books to refer, because these protocols, as well as the server's description of the server, how they do work, they usually are published in Methods in Molecular Biology series by Humana Press. So which are very, very costly to procure. One book will cost you somewhere around 11 to 12,000 rupees. So I don't recommend any reference books for these things, but I can recommend you some of the review articles, which usually you better refer for nucleic acid research. Every June edition, they publish the database report, and every January edition they publish about the tools or server reports. So I recommend you to look for the June as well as January editions of nucleic acid research.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Santosh Kumar sir,
Sure,
for your valuable information regarding the path of how to discover the drug. From the beginning to the end, you have shown a very good path regarding the drug discovery and the designing. Thank you. So any questions from the audience? So please, one by one, ask the questions.
Okay. Some Suruchi Gupta, she is asking, can we use this study in fungal pathogen related to plant? Right. So you can definitely, Miss Suruchi, right? So you can definitely do this, because pipeline is a pipeline. Okay. So whether you use the protein for bacteria, whether you use the protein for fungus, it remains the same. The data remains the same. That's what my idea is. Data is a data. It depends on how do you look at the data, right? So if you are accessible to the data of your interest, you can use this pipeline. So what I am interested more in designing the pipeline as well as methods. I will be very happy, right? To design you can even contact me. I can help you in designing the pipeline. So once you have the pipeline, if you have the access for the right data, you can definitely work it out. the host as well as organism it doesn't matter.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Santosh, sir. So the next session will commence at 11:30. So the attendance will be sent to the WhatsApp. So please join at 11:30. Thank you, Santosh, sir.
Thank you, sir.